It was just something that I remembered how to do. And I feel like this is a big key that people are missing, remembering that they live again and again, because I always say you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And so being cut off from that has been, I feel like, really catastrophic to people, because there's so much untold story that we could greatly benefit from. And so, having that sacred space and that intention and then
Welcome to the Awaken Magazine podcast, where we feature inspiring leaders who are helping our world awaken to love. I'm your host, David Trotter, and today I want to share with you an amazing conversation with Denea Hugunin. She's a multifaceted psychic who has been doing this work not only for many years, but for many lifetimes. And in this conversation, Denea shares with us what it was like to be born fluent with all of her clairs, and how this has given her the ability to read your soul history, not only backward, but forward. She also shares with us her experiences with extraterrestrial beings and how that has impacted her life, as well as her work clearing past life trauma and reincarnational karma. And if you haven't already, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Awaken Magazine podcast. You can do that on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, or on YouTube. Click subscribe, rate, and review the show. That's a great way to help us spread the word to more people about the incredible articles and content and interviews that we put out on a weekly basis. All right, hey, let's jump into this conversation with Denea Hugunin. Well, Denea, thanks so much for taking time to hang with us today. It's great to be with you.
Great to be with you too, David. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. So following your social media, I know that you have a unique vantage point, just as an individual, of course, but also with all that you do as a multifaceted psychic. And so I'm just curious to know, what do you sense is unfolding in our world right now?
Well, a lot of things, but I think primarily the biggest thing to focus on is I feel like whether it's individually or collectively, I feel like everyone's on a journey back to home. Back to home, meaning I feel like there's been a lot of misuse of energy, a lot of greed, a lot of power issues, power struggles. I feel like a lot of just reversals, so to speak. And I feel like it's now coming to head. Also, there's a lot of reincarnational history that's going on, a lot of reincarnational trauma, a lot of reincarnational karma. And I feel like a lot of that is really coming to a head. We are in a complete redoing of Atlantis. So if you or anyone listening is familiar with Atlantis, we are in a redoing of Atlantis and how we lost our way. And Atlantis was one of many different experiences that are in a way similar, with the misuse of energy and kind of losing our way as humanity and as a collective. And so I really think that ideally right now, everyone is working their way back to a home base, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about your initial home base, your growing up years, and how perhaps I'm just curious about your story in terms of faith or spirituality and kind of how that unfolded for you over the years as you were awakening to consciousness and mindfulness and your own intuitive abilities. Tell us about your home life and that component of it.
Yeah. So I look back now and I'm like, I probably had a very unusual life. So, well, at least the way that I interpret it as the age that I'm at now. So I was born very psychically blown open. So I was born fluent in all my clairs. And I feel like at that time, there wasn't a good, which is absolutely fair. Like there just wasn't a community or system to say, give me guidance or give me, a way, a path forward where I felt supported. So I kind of just harbored a lot of this to myself. And, my experience as a child was very different, and I was raised Christian. I've always been a very spiritual person, and the church to me gave me purpose for a long time, even though I had nothing, it didn't ever really stick with me, but it felt like the closest thing at the time for spirituality for me. And so I loved that. Um, I always I've always been someone who always has had questions. Like the human experience never really made sense to me. And so I've always been one who was a seeker, a truth teller, and someone who's always trying to figure out how things work and things being the human experience, right? I always say I've been an avid studier of human language, meaning human experience. And so that for me has been a very expanding, long journey to this point that I am now. And it wasn't until my later years where I found like I really started to find my tribe and really started to be like, oh, okay, well, the way that I am is actually normal. It's just what I came in with. So I'm going to work with this. And, but yeah, spirituality, I was raised in the church. I even sought it out when I was on my own, when I left the home. And, the more I started diving into it, and even I always say, if you have the opportunity to travel abroad and to other countries, I feel like that's really expansive because then you get to see how other people live. And then you're like, well, what makes me better than them? And what makes my God better than their God? And so that really started to expand me a lot. And I had even more questions. And so I've just been on this trail, David, of even coming home to myself, right? Finding my own truth and figuring out the bigger picture of reality. And that has been quite the journey.
Hmm.
So
Are there one or two moments along the way where you see those as kind of markers where there was like a breakthrough or a shift for you?
where things really started to pivot for me is when I started to have the extraterrestrial experiences. And where I started to realize, wow, I've actually been connected to these things my entire life. So if this exists, then for sure, what is religion? And it just expanded everything else that I thought I knew as a human. And so that was when things really started to pivot. And my
When
work with
when
them.
was that? When was that and what happened to you?
So, you know, it's so many stories. I'm trying to think of a good one to relay to you. So I have the ability to, first off, I've seen craft my entire life. I've seen UFOs in many different facets and many different junctures of my life. But what really started to take off was my dream state. And I have always been someone who has premonitions. I am very active in the dream state. I've traveled in the dream state, astral projection, all that kind of stuff. And so I starting to remember in my waking state, my dream state, and I was going to school in my dream state. I was interacting with extraterrestrials. I was interacting with other versions of myself on the timeline. And there was all of these, I'm waking up and I'm thinking, something's going on here. My psychic work, they started popping in when I was channeling. There's just so many things, David. And I kept thinking, okay, if I'm having these connections, then who am I and what am I connected to? And what are we all connected to? And that's when things really started to pivot for me because I was like, we're really been given a really bland story on how we see life. And we've really been greatly misled on the connections that we have to our ancestral history, which I think is in the stars. And, ever since I kind of welcomed these experiences and energies, it just keeps growing and expanding and growing and growing and growing. And so that's really the extraterrestrial thing has been the biggest thing, David, that has really changed my life.
Mm-hmm. I love the way you said that. We have been given a bland story about this experience. That is what a great way to say it. Okay, so you've had these extraterrestrial experiences, and did your parents like? Did you share these things with them as you were growing up? How did they handle that?
You know, Honestly, David, I still to this day haven't told them a lot of these things. They are incredibly supportive of me. And honestly, they're my biggest fans. But I feel like when you're dealing with extraterrestrials, there's and it's not that I wouldn't tell them. I tell them where their awareness would allow me to speak to them. Do you know what I'm
Sure.
saying? If I
Oh,
start
yeah.
saying, hey, I've been abducted since a little girl, they're going to say, my mom is probably going to start crying. And my dad is just going to look at me like I have 10 heads. And he's going to want to understand, but they're just going to be like, wait a second, like this, what are you talking about? And so I've always been a person where I keep things to myself unless I'm in and have an audience that can, meet me where I am. And for a
Sure.
long time, it has been difficult. In a lot of ways, I feel like the world has had to catch up to this stuff,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
fair. That's what the time we're in. So, my parents, they love my work. They're absolutely in support, but the whole ET thing, um, they're still trying to understand this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
My mom will just say, I just don't want to know. I just don't want to know.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's like,
so funny.
close, it's like see no evil, hear no evil, whatever it is. I
Totally.
just don't want to see it. And then I don't have to
Yes.
deal with it.
Yeah.
How did this develop or I guess unfold in terms of your career? Did you start working in a certain field and then pivot into being a psychic? How did this play out for you?
So it played out for me when I really, for a long time, honestly, I tried to shut these things down, because it was not widely accepted. And I feel like any human wants to find their tribe and they want to fit in and they want to just have normal life experiences. And my whole life has been anything but. And so for a long time, I tried to ignore them. And eventually it came to a point, and I understand it now through my astrology, there was activation points. And it was basically like, you came here for a reason. Now it's time to step into that power and that truth and be unapologetic. You need to trust the process, and this process is going to be unknown to you, but it's going to be known. And what was interesting to me, David, is I actually started reactivating gifts from other lives. So once I started understanding, okay, my multidimensional history, my reincarnational history, I thought, okay, this makes sense then. So let's start reactivating these things that I've been doing for so many lifetimes. And I just started out as a basic, I say basic, just like an intuitive reader, basic reader. And I started reworking that muscle. And once I started doing that, it was like things just kept coming online. I mean, I had tried to do classes, but nothing ever stuck with me. And I just kept being told, you are going to be the creator. Like, you are going to pick up the pieces along the way, along the trail that resonates, and then the rest is up to you. You are the builder of your own empire. So you are not supposed to resonate with everyone. You are the teacher. And so I started really embracing that, and it has really taken me on quite the ride, to be honest. And it has been so rewarding in so many different ways. And so I have been connecting with again, the other versions of myself throughout the lines of time, on top of not just in the past, but also in the future. So I have future versions of myself that I'm working with. Those are the extraterrestrial versions. And it's so interesting when you start getting into this work, David, because you're like, wow, boy, have we been dumbed down. Boy, have we been shut down and like tweaked and modified in ways that we think life is so boring and purposeless. And it's like, wow, once people really understand the abilities that we actually have, all of us, it's really profound and it's so encouraging. And that's the shortest version of my long story that I could give you.
Yeah, yeah. So you're referring to past, present, and future lives.
Hmm.
So for people who maybe that's new for, and I just want to get inside your brain, how
Yeah.
do you see how that works in our world?
Well, so we live again and again, and I really specialize a lot in reincarnational trauma and reincarnational karma, and that could be good or bad, right? But I help people remember their multidimensionality, that they are one piece to a much bigger puzzle, and everything is interacting at the same time. And so that is really the biggest thing for people to understand is once you understand, you live again and again, and you pick up where you've left off. So I know that I was a famous psychic in one of my last lifetimes. That's still to this day pretty well known in the industry. And so I've been piggybacking off of that work and all the books that have been written and all of the work that I already did. So I picked that all back up. And once I realized I could do that, because also everything is stored in your DNA. So if you have access to that, everyone has access to that. So if you understand how to dive into that and unpack that, you can start to unpack your own story. It's like a library of your own story. You're reading all these different books and knowledge, but it's all yours. It's all your creations. And so that's basically what I started doing. And then that started proceeding into the future. And that was very different. And so it's this collective experience across the lines of time. I don't know how else to explain it, but everyone has this. Everyone has connections from the past and the future. And I feel like now everyone really has the opportunity to tap into this and know themselves better. And you would be shocked on even the tiniest bit of details that have been continuously carried over from another life.
Give me an example of that. Details that have been carried over. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So in one of my recent past lives, my grandfather had died in front of me by a horse accident. And in this current life, I have, ever since a little girl, I have always had this really weird fear of horses, which is odd because they're really beautiful. And to me, they're very spiritual and they're just incredible. But every time I got on a horse when I was younger, I actually had 2 occasions I almost died. And I couldn't figure out for the longest time why I was always so repelled by these creatures, which again, I love them, but there was just this internal subconscious memory and knowing. And it wasn't until I had this memory of, okay, well, I watched a family member die in front of me when a horse came down on him in another life.
Mm. How do you access these past lives? I know one popular technique, QHHT, that Dolores Cannon developed. Do you help people access their past lives? How do you access your past? How would I access my past lives?
Yeah.
Give me the portal. Where do I enter?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, when doing anything, I feel like intention is everything. So if you have the intention to access another life, I feel like that, in a sense, along with like a sacred prayer, or just setting the space, calling in protection, I feel like is enough. Everyone has their own way to access these things, but for me, that's the way that I do it. And also, it's just something that happened because I've been doing this for so long. Throughout my reincarnational history. And so the intention is everything. Yes, I started doing this on my own. It was just something that I remembered how to do. And, I feel like this is a big key that people are missing, remembering that they live again and again, because I always say you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. And so being cut off from that has been, I feel like, really catastrophic to people because there's so much untold story that we could greatly benefit from. And so, having that sacred space and that intention. And then what I see when I go into past lives is being able to read it. But what I love with the QHHT is it puts the client in the position to see what I see. And when you are in the position to see what I see and go through the whole emotionality and the whole experience, I feel like that's really profound. It can create such a deeper healing than someone saying, hey, I saw you in X, Y, and Z and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You know what I
You have to
mean?
take their word for it.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
just hits different. And I think that's important. That's the whole
Mm-hmm.
goal, is to create a healing.
Mm-hmm. And in your work, do you lead people through QHHT or are you more accessing it yourself?
Honestly, I think it's both because because I've already been doing that, but I guide the client
Mm-hmm.
through that.
Mm-hmm.
So it does help having a bit of a psychic background, but yes. So I guide the person through the experience, which is really profound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you talk about that we bring with us trauma or karma from other lifetimes. And so what I'm understanding from you is all these lifetimes are happening simultaneously. Is that correct?
Yep.
And uh, we bring that trauma or karma forward. How do we clear that, heal that, change that? How do you help us do that?
So many ways. And there's also collective trauma, right? So if there was a soul group of people who, I'll give an example. If there's a soul group of people who incarnated in a time that there was maybe a plague, or these people saw a lot of death, okay? What happened in 2020 wouldn't just be triggering just because, oh my gosh, what's happening? But there's a timeline trigger there. So there's a wound there that hasn't been healed from the time that they lived where they saw a mass exodus with people. So that's another thing that I think is important because everyone is being timeline triggered right now through some way, shape, or form. So understanding that there's collective trauma, there's personal trauma, like individual trauma. And so, um, you know, understanding that is really important. And I'm sorry, what was the first question? I feel like that got me off track.
Yeah, just how do we clear
Oh, yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
handle trauma or karma from other lives?
So the biggest thing that I can say is when you're going into another life and you're in this, even whether it's timeline triggering or individual trauma, oftentimes, David, it's just seeing the event. It's re-seeing the event from a different perspective, from a different mind, different belief system for you to say, okay, I understand now why it happened the way it did. Because what
Mm.
happens is trauma stores in the body. And so, and in the DNA. And so when it's expressed as a wound, it's expressed as unhealed. And so all it wants to do generally is it just wants to be seen, like a person who wants to be seen and heard and acknowledged. It's like that. And oftentimes when you see the experience, it will clear it in itself. It's really just about the acknowledgement. If there is stuck energy in the body, there's other techniques. For me, I really love the emotion code technique because I feel like it's foolproof and I've had really great success with that.
Mhm.
Pulling out that stuck energy, though there's somatic exercises, there's so many things to move that out of the body. And there's so many people who have, well, I would say everyone in some way, shape, or form has some form of stuck experience from another life.
Mhm. So take me through a reading. It sounds like so much more than a reading that you're walking people through. If somebody comes to you for a reading, what would they expect? Are they saying, like, hey, I've got this problem in my life. Can you help me with it? What's the average person come to you with?
You know, honestly, everyone comes for different reasons, obviously. You can come exactly as you are. You can come with no questions. You can come with curiosity, even. When I go into someone's energy, I immediately get a list of things to talk about, to go into further. And so we start with that list if someone doesn't have questions. And I basically generate a direction of something that needs to be healed or let go of or just acknowledge. It's not always something like going into the trenches of your own soul, but there's always something to gain. And I always say people get what they're looking for, but they also get a lot of what they had no idea they even needed. So it really just depends. I've had people with a lot of trauma. I've had people with a lot of successes. I've had people, every side of the spectrum I've had readings. So I feel like my biggest thing is I tell people to come exactly as you are, and that's more than enough.
Mhm. And so, what would they expect in a reading? You connect with them energetically, and then what unfolds over the time?
Yeah, so I do connect with them energetically, but it's a faceted experience because I'm not only pulling their reincarnational history, I'm scanning the body for any ailments, diseases, helping you connect them to where those are. Are there any deficiencies in the bodies? Is there any stuck energy in the body? Okay, is there any, and there always is some reincarnational trauma or karma that comes up in someone's reading, and it's expressing itself through maybe relationships or beliefs of lack or abandonment wounds. Or there's so many things. I've seen a tremendous amount of medical ailments and diseases, especially undiagnosed, that have come from another time. Like maybe you were brutally killed, and in that area that maybe you were stabbed is now an undiagnosable pain that no one can figure out, but it's just taunting you your entire life. I mean, I really connect people back to their multidimensionality. And I kind of joke that I'm like your multidimensional therapist, because I don't see you as face value. I see you with this huge expanded picture. Deceased loved ones. I also do a lot of animal communication. So it's a lot of different things, David. And every person is different. So depending on what they need is exactly what they will get.
Hmm. You're making me feel overwhelmed because I thought I just had to deal with like this life. And now you're like, well, technically you got to deal with like hundreds of lives. So you're pretty much screwed. Like,
But it's so empowering, David. It's so empowering because then you're like, wow, my life has so much meaning and
right,
there's
right.
so much here. And there's a lot of good stuff. And so I think it's really empowering.
How can in that theme of empowerment, how can I actually tap into the resources? And you mentioned this earlier, not just of overcoming the challenges that I had in previous lives, but actually tapping into the knowledge or experience or wisdom of those previous lives. How can I do that?
So have you ever had an Akashic reading?
I have not. No.
So you could have an Akashic reading, you could do regression therapy. I oftentimes say, even if you do just meditation, there's a lot of times people don't realize just by sitting and being
Yeah.
and allowing things to come in, you will easily just access other versions of yourself or get pictures of other lives where I feel like as humans, we haven't really been taught much about our psychic sense. And so we just internalize, oh, it's just a thought. I'm just going to discard that. But no, a lot of times, many people have already received these messages, but they have not given the tools to decipher what they actually are. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know for me, and I've shared this on several other interviews, I've had several plant medicine experiences recently that
Yes, me too.
I started channeling involuntarily. Like the messages just for people in the room, I did it like an hour for like 12 people. I can see inside of every single person. And
What?
then I've had this happen 3 times. And more recently, just like 2 weeks ago, I felt it come in. It's an energetic presence that comes in. And it's I would describe it as my higher self because I turn into like this Jim Carrey character as it comes on. It is I could privately show you the videos because I this time I went into another space, turned on the lights, called a friend, and my partner Mandy and I were doing it together, but she was having her own experience, and she's seen me do this wackadoodle experience, and so I called a friend, and she started recording her screen, and so we're doing Facebook, like video chat. I said, "Hey, do you want a reading?" And she said, "Yeah." And so I'm physically moving in ways I can't control myself. I see inside of her. I give this reading, and then I said, "Okay, start feeding me names because I've never done this before with other people that I don't know." So she started giving me names, and I'm filming it in the light so she could see how spastic my body becomes. And and I mean, Danae, the things that I knew about people that I did not know, like one example, she gave me the name of her sister, who I don't know. I see this fly going around my eye and I start swatting it away. And I'm saying there's a fly in my eye. And I sound ridiculous today. I'm like, there's a fly in my eye. It's just I
Yeah.
don't know. Right. And and there's a horse. I go, no, it's connected to a horse. And I saw her sister on a horse riding with freedom, right? And so I see this, and then I go, oh, your highest value is freedom. I see you riding the horse, and it's freedom. And I said, oh, but your other value is love, and it's competing because
Oh,
you've had freedom without
yes.
love, and you've had love without freedom, but you don't think that they can go together. And
Yeah.
so anyway, I do this whole message and I come out of it and I look at her and I'm still under the medicine and I go, does your sister like horses or whatever? She's like, no, I don't know anything about it. She calls her sister the next day. She shows her the reading. She goes, I just bid on a horse last week. Like I want a horse. And she said, yeah, my boyfriend keeps asking me to marry him, but I don't want to marry him because I want to keep my freedom.
Oh.
Danae, what the heck? Right? And I've got four more stories just like that from this experience. So I share all of that to echo with you. When I ask you, how do you see into past lives? You kind of look at me like, I just do it. I'm like, I get it. You just do it.
And okay, so I think a couple things are happening here for you. First off, you're tapping in, you're so spot on. And accessing the records is going to be different for everyone, David. Like I said, I've taken classes and everyone has kind of their different way. And so I always say if you're having these experiences, go with it and roll with it and make it your own, because it doesn't mean that there's just one way to do it. And I think that most people have these abilities that are for sure starting to come online. And I also think you're tapping in also to your light language. And I also think that you have extraterrestrial guidance. You
How do
have
you?
light beings. You got a lot going on. I think it's really cool.
I the light language flows through me in those moments
Yeah.
uncontrollably. It just
Oh,
kind of flows, and it won't stop. It's kind of like this flow of energy coming through me. So, yeah, it's interesting.
yeah, but can I say one more thing to give you this tidbit? When the light language comes out, it's coming out in symbols, and so you're imprinting. So when you're the way that it looks like to me, it's this it's there's several things happening, but you're bringing symbols out and you're activating them, and it's also going into people's chakras, which is also activating them.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Part of my journey is how do I do this without the medicine, right? And that's what I'm kind of trying to ease into and not rush it. But it is a very profound experience. It has changed my life in the last 6 months. Like, whoa, this is nutty. So, when you talk about all these things, um, some of it feels like indescribable.
Mhm.
The way that you're accessing these things. How have people around you responded in terms of criticism or judgment? Or I was even on your website of watching, you're on like Colorado television, like morning television, talking to hosts, and you're like,
Yeah.
yes, I access past lives, and the guy's like, huh?
Totally. So I have gratefully received some big recognition. I was just published in MSN for one of the number one women must watch in 2025. And I've been on TV, I've been in magazines, and I'm really grateful for the recognition. But I've primarily received a lot of great feedback. I think the issue too with my work still is it's a trigger. I trigger people, and not in a malicious way, but I do bring forth a lot of information that is, whoa, us humans have been living life a certain way for a very long time, and you're kind of rocking the boat with that. And what makes you right? And what makes you the person to bring this forward? And I'm one of many who's bringing forward these truths, but
Sure.
it's just been, I feel like the biggest trigger for people is when we start getting into religion. I just went viral last week actually talking about this stuff. And, there's a lot of really angry people. And I think I heard this quote recently, and it was like the illiterate of 20, the new age is going to be those who cannot read and write. It's not them, but it's the ones who cannot unlearn to relearn, because the reality is we've had a lot of human conditioning that has kept us stuck in time. And I'm kind of the one of the many who are saying, hey, we've been stuck in time. Let me help you through this. Let's evolve, let's grow, let's expand, and let's go to higher states of awareness and living and existing. And that is usually well received, David. But yes, I do have people who get very angry and see me as, I don't know, it's a lot of the church programming, like the
Right.
antichrist stuff, yeah, there's just a lot of, yeah. So, but primarily it's been really well received,
Yeah.
thankfully.
Yeah. Yeah. One
Yeah.
of the things that I know, as you just mentioned, that you talk about is programming from our culture, from our families, from our religions. And you talk about helping people guide them. You help guide them back to what you call their original programming.
Yes.
What is our original programming, and how do we get back to that?
You know, Here is what I started with my spiritual journey. I said, for 15 minutes a day, I'm going to put everything aside, and I'm going to put every belief I've ever had, or every belief that was projected onto me through my parents, through education system, through society, through friends, whatever it is. I'm going to put everything aside, and I'm going to be a blank slate. And for those 15 minutes, I'm going to see what comes in. And when I did that, I mean, I already knew beliefs shape your reality, but to really see, okay, there's a lot of conditioning and through generations, David, right? If you have someone who's been in your family line maybe 100 generations ago, and maybe they were really embedded in the church, and there were times of human existence where if you were not part of the church, you were an outcast, you were nobody. And so if you have that hard rooted in the DNA, that's very easy for you to pick back up. And so I always say, your beliefs also expand from this lifetime as well. So we need to start collectively understanding, where are we getting all of this? Like, where are we getting all of these ideas and beliefs and ways of living? Are they even ours? And so I've always just kind of thought in this way of, this just doesn't make sense. Why does it always have to be this way? Why is it that humans have always been, living, breathing, eating in these ways? Why are these the only acceptable ways? And so, it's just, sorry, what was the original question?
No,
David?
it's
Sorry.
great. Just how do we get back to what is our
Oh,
original
yeah. So let me get
programming and
back.
how do we get back to it?
So getting back to it is really going to come down to awareness. Okay. Where you can be aware enough and say, okay, my beliefs about, it could be anything, relationships. Do I believe that I am capable of receiving the highest, best, most, incredible love? Like, where did those lack of relationship beliefs come from? And so that's where this comes in, is having the awareness to say, well, where have all my beliefs come from? Was it my teacher who said I was never going to amount to anything? So now I have these blocks on creating my highest timeline? Is it my parents who had a lot of generational trauma? And there's so many strings and avenues that we can dissect. So in my opinion, it comes down to awareness. And a human being in original programming, naked, on a soul level, is nothing, absolutely nothing that we've ever been taught in human life, in my opinion. From what I've seen and what I've channeled and what I've been connecting to, it's nothing at all what we have ever been told. And we are actually God, creator, source. We are part of this creator source. And I feel like that has been really robbed from us. And so what I feel like we've been doing as humans is just building other people's empires, building other people's ideas of reality, building other people's belief systems. And I think it's time that we take that power back and say, hey, there's a different story to be told here. And so the original programming, and I also believe that we had 12 strands of DNA. We had more cranial capacity. we've been altered. We've been genetically altered. We've been shut down. There's a lot here, David, that we could unpack with the original human programming, but this isn't it. This isn't it.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about this concept of making agreements with individuals across timelines.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, pre-timeline, like just soul agreements, soul contracts, all of this. How do you see that? How does that work with us? And how can we change those agreements if they're not working for us?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a traumatic experience from a client, but I've seen this a lot, so I'll use this one. So being we live again and again, we do go into contracts with people, especially through marriage. And we can be solely connected with people, which can create karma. And I know some people don't like the word karma, but then just use cause and effect. Okay. So there was this client of mine. She was married to a man and he was really abusive, ended up divorcing him. But when we went into the records, we found out, okay, she had this unsubtle fear with him, never felt safe with him, couldn't trust him, all these things. And when we went into the records, we found out, okay, well, in one of your last lives, he actually killed you and the children. And the children today have the birthmark in the back of their head where the gunshot went through. And in this lifetime, because all that was unhealed, they met back up in hopes to have a healing. That's usually what it is. So you plan these things out, you plan your roles. All right, we're going to come down, be this person for me, you be that person for me. Let's see what we can create here. And for her in this life, it was really about breaking that contract. It was, taking her power back and saying, I'm not doing this cycle with you anymore. We've been doing this too many times. I'm going a different route, and breaking that soul contract so that, after this life, she's not coming back and reincarnating into the same chaos with this person. And there's so many of these stories, David, of reconnecting. And oftentimes your enemies can be your best friends in the spirit world. Your children could have been your parents in another life. There's so many things that we choose willingly to create for ourselves, to learn, to evolve as a soul.
And do you find that there is value in trying to like opt out of those agreements on this side? It's like, dang it, I shouldn't have made that agreement on that other side. Like, or do you just go, nope, you got to roll with it?
That's the hard part, right? I feel like we've all had experiences where you're like, I just do not like you. I don't like sharing space with you. I just don't like this experience. But I feel like if you have that, then if you're having those feelings and those triggers, then there's something still for you to learn. Because once you get to this place in your life where you feel whole or you feel healed, and there's no such thing as a perfectly healed person. Being human is a very imperfect process. But if you're in a situation that's difficult and you can't at the end of the day look at it and say, wow, I have gratitude for this because now I know X, Y, and Z, and I wouldn't have known it had I been in this situation or met this person. So if you haven't gotten to that point yet to have the gratitude for the situation, no matter how difficult it had been, there's still something missing. There's still something for you to learn. That's my interpretation of it anyways.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about animals. You said you do a lot of animal communication. Do you have clients that come to you with challenges with their animals? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I love the animal communication. So I feel like people do come to me for animal communication. Every animal is so different. I mean, on the spectrum of awareness, every animal is just absolutely so different. So I feel like a lot of things that really come up with animals is the mistreatment, especially the lack of acknowledgement that they are conscious beings, the food that we feed them, the nutrient deficiencies that they experience, which can also wreak havoc with their emotional body, their mental state. There's a lot of things that I feel like they try to bring awareness. In a sense, how can we elevate their experience and see them differently and treat them differently, even just through the food source, right? Like the way that the animals are treated through the food that we eat is it's really catastrophically terrible in my opinion. And I've come to a place, even in my work, I can take a bite of meat and I can tell you if that animal was killed humanely. I can tell you the emotionality of that animal and what its life was like. And it's been a little difficult for me. Even I can't eat a lot of meat because our food system is so it's really not good emotionally, and even just the hormones that they produce before they're just a lot of things. So really just about the mistreatment of the animals. Although and I do have a lot of people who love their animals. I don't know if you have pets, but so many of them come through with the acknowledgement of thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me a life that made me feel safe on earth. Thank you for treating me like I was one of you. And the love and compassion and the way that they are seen by those who see them is profound. I mean, I've been left in tears in some of these readings of just the acknowledgement from the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm. I had a mediumship reading several months ago, and I was thinking, I don't really necessarily have a need. I don't sense a need for closure among any humans that I know that have passed. And I was just going in open-minded, open-hearted. And the medium says, we normally have like a dog or something or a pet that comes in and we kind of set them aside till later. But this dog is so like profound and strong in the moment. And it's small, kind of blonde colored, light colored dog. Their name is Lexi. I'm like, yeah, it's my dog. His name's Lexi. There you go.
Oh,
Like this
yeah.
medium is really good with names. And that blew my mind, Danae, that
Mhm.
a dog would know its name, come through. Like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, I'm confused here, right? And that really is the only entity I would say that in my life I don't have like full closure on, that
Yeah.
because I was so close to this dog the past several years ago. It's amazing how our world uh, works. I love how you described we've been told a bland story about this experience, and it is so much more vibrant. You have kids. Is your how are your intuitive abilities and your way of questioning the world and asking questions, how is that playing out as you're raising your own kids in this life?
Wow, being a mother. Oh, let me add this for your piece really quick with the animal, David, because sometimes if you have an animal that you're really, really close with, oftentimes that animal has followed you from another life. And that's that draw and that bond, that closeness. So talk to her. And if they ever want, and when they're ready, you can ask them to come back and you guys can find each other again. But chances are you'll probably find them in another life anyways. So I just want to add that for you and
Amazing.
Lexi.
Yeah.
So as a mother, when I became a mother, I mean, I thought I was already psychically blown open, but that just took me to another level. That was an initiation for sure. And I feel like it's been I mean, you're a father, David. Being a parent is a very humbling, exciting experience. It's hard work. You're raising your own species. Like it's your own copy, right? And I always tell my kids, I'm like, you have to be better than me, not in an ego way, but we have to do things better. And I feel like for me as a mother, that's also inspired me so much to continue my own healing journey and my own work, because I know through reincarnation, what we don't work out, our children can take on. And I'm kind of that mama bear in a sense, like, I don't want you to have the life that I did. I don't want you to have the childhood trauma that I did. I don't want you to be set up and go through all of these things where you're left unpacking them for a good chunk of your adult life. I don't want that for them. And so I feel like for me, it's been a lot of doing my own internal work and teaching them all these things that I know, but now at their young age, they're 6, they're twin boys, and I'm teaching them all the things that I learned throughout my life, but they get it now, age appropriately, obviously, but they get it at such a young age. And I'm always like, wow, I can't wait to see what you do with this. I mean, my son just asked me the other day, Mom, who created us and who created Earth and the planets and everything? Like, where did all this start? And I looked at him and I thought, first off, that's big thinking, buddy. Like, keep that going, keep the awareness expanding, keep asking questions. And so being a parent has been very rewarding for me, and it's had me meet myself in so many ways that I honestly don't think I would have done had I not had my sons. And I always say my work is great, but like my legacy is my family and my children. And they're hands down the most important extension of me, piece of me, everything. They're it for me.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Hey, if people want to get a reading with you, receive a reading, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, which is readingswithdenea.com, and or you can follow me on Instagram, which is Denea for Humanity. And those are probably the 2 best ways to get in touch with me.
Great. And we'll link to that in all of your social media accounts as well.
Cool.
Denea, thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom. Thank you for how you're making the world a better place. I really appreciate it. It's great to connect with you.
Thank you for having me, David. I enjoyed this. Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thanks for listening to the Awaken Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and our other conversations, would you mind taking a moment to leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? That's one of the ways that you can give back to the show and help us reach more people. And of course, feel free to share the episode with a friend. And if you're not already on our email list, we send out an inspiring email every Monday morning full of articles and interviews. Just head on over to awakenedmagazine.com and click subscribe and join for free. Our hope is that all the resources we share will help our world continue awakening to love.